Welcome to Season 3 of Heart of the Gulch. On today's episode, we sit down with Emmy Award-winning meteorologist and Channel 5's host of the iconic lifestyle show Talk of the Town, Heather Mathis. On today's Walk the Line episode, we follow Heather as she does her thing on Talk of the Town and then go behind the scenes as she interviews an up-and-coming golf brand here in Nashville. Let's check out the episode. We are in the heart of the Gulch, and today, my name is Tony Mendoza. I almost forgot right there. Today, we have an awesome guest. Not only an awesome guest, an Emmy Award-winning guest. She's got one more award more than me, and I don't got any, so that's amazing. Also, we have a meteorologist, an amazing person that's originally from here in Nashville. We got the one and only Heather Mathis in the building. What's going on?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
You like it?
Yes, I am normally on the other side of interviewing people, so it's different for me to be on this side of things.
You know, I was talking to Laura about this a while ago, and she said that it's almost a little intimidating, that you kind of clam up a little bit. Is that how you feeling?
I do feel that way because when I go into interviewing people, I do so much to prepare for it, and I know exactly what questions I want to ask. Mm-hmm. So to kind of be on the blind side, you know, on the other end, it is a little bit nerve-wracking, but we're gonna have fun.
Well, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming to the Heart of the Gulch.
Yes.
It is, I was telling her a little earlier that, you know, the Gulch has changed. Well, you're originally from here, so you already know. The Gulch has changed so much that just getting into the studio and getting into the parking lot that you saw, it used to be impossible to get in.
Yeah. I mean, when I was coming through all the construction, it's like, what more can they build out here, you know?
Well, not enough, because obviously people that are coming in from all over the country, you've seen it. This town originally wasn't a transplant city.
No, it wasn't. I mean, I grew up in Mount Juliet, so I mean, it's just outside of Nashville. Mm-hmm. But still, you know, the city itself, I just remember as a kid, it wasn't the city, obviously, that it is today, and just seeing it change and grow so much from what I remember it as. And so now when I go and tell people, like if I'm on vacation at the beach and I say I'm from Nashville, people who live like at the beach are like, oh, that's so cool. It's like, what? you have an ocean, you know?
Oh man. And you know, the funny thing is I've noticed that everyone from Nashville, when they vacation, they vacation in not Fort Walton, not Destin, 30A.
You know, I am not a 30A person.
Hey, finally I meet someone like-minded. Where do you like to vacation when your family goes vacation?
Well, my sister lives in Florida, in Gainesville, so that's like in the center, right? She doesn't have an ocean, but we always go over to St. Augustine. I just love St. Augustine Beach. It's my favorite.
I was there I was driving down from Miami, from Nashville, and I stopped at St. Augustine because it's in between Jacksonville and Miami, for the folks that are not aware. And I was beating a hurricane.
Oh.
And it was the most scariest experience. I have a small car. Yeah. So when it rains in Florida.
Oh, it rains buckets.
And you know what? Speaking as a meteorologist, I got a question for you already from the back. Right?
Go ahead.
Why does it rain so much here in Nashville?
Oh my gosh, I know. It feels like we have more rainy days than we have sunny. Especially
like I'm in Seattle.
I know. Well, I mean, there's many different reasons and causes for why it rains so much. The summer, you know, guess what? It's hot, and then when you get that hot air and you get the moisture and the humidity, it just leads to summertime thunderstorms. Almost happen every single day. But I know, I get it. I hate every time I have to put a chance for rain, and especially on the weekend, I'm like, oh, I'm just the messenger, you guys. Okay, I'm sorry.
It is a funny situation because meteorologists get a lot of, you know, they get a lot of love, they get a lot of hate, they get everything in between. Yeah,
very true. We do. If I had $1 for every time someone said to me, I wish I could be wrong at my job, it's like, man, I could retire, honestly.
Oh, seriously. And now, but speaking of which, we're going to continue going down your journey.
Sure.
So Mount Juliet.
Yes.
Tell me about how much that changed.
Oh my gosh. Well, if anyone is familiar with Mount Juliet now, I mean, we have everything out there. They say it's like the Franklin of the east side of town, which is crazy to me because when I grew up in Mount Juliet, we had a Piggly Wiggly and that was it.
R.I.P. the Piggly Wigglies, man.
I know. It's not there anymore.
There was only one left when I moved here.
There's still one in Old Hickory.
Is there?
One, yes.
Shout out to the Piggly Wigglies.
Yeah, there's still one there because I live over in that direction. So sometimes I have to go to the Piggly Wiggly in Old Hickory. But yeah, no, Mount Juliet was just a really small town. And it was one of those towns where, I mean, I knew everyone in school. We had one elementary school, one high school. Now it's just, my gosh, every time I go back to my parents' house, I'm like, what is this? We got a Dunkin' Donuts out here? You know, it's blossomed so much.
Dunkin' Donuts. And you know that everything has changed when Dunkin' comes into town.
Exactly.
That's a fact.
We have arrived.
Yes, exactly. Well, Mount Juliet, for the people that are watching this from all over the United States, shout out to the people that are watching this in Washington, D.C. I saw someone post that the other day. But Mount Juliet is maybe 20 minutes?
Yeah, 15, 20 minutes.
Less than 20 minutes, really,
yeah.
Depending on the traffic. Mm-hmm. And it's now become the suburban life of Nashville.
It really has. It's where a lot of families, I mean, they choose to live outside of the big city itself, moving to places like Mount Juliet, Hendersonville, Gallatin, you know, all of those areas. I mean, Donaldson, my goodness, it's just
Donaldson's
exploding.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about this because when I first moved to Nashville, before I came to the Gulch, I always looked at Mount Juliet because obviously the prices were cheaper. It was a little different.
Yeah.
Did they always have that train or that ram that takes you from Mount Juliet to downtown?
You know, I remember that coming probably towards the end of my time in high school. I mean, it was definitely early 2000s, I would say, that we got the Nashville Star. I think
is that what it's called, the Nashville Star?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and that will take you. And I've never ridden it before, but I know, I mean, the parking lot there is always full of people.
I've never met anyone that's ridden it either. Yeah. Which is pretty amazing that how many cars I'll see parked out there when I am driving out there.
Yeah.
And it's just very interesting to me that it's such a cool concept, and I was wondering if that's always been there.
No, it hasn't. It's been in the last couple of decades that they did that.
Well, speaking about just growing up and everything and growing up in Nashville, I mean, I'm not going to ask you any typical questions about where's the best places to eat, but are you a foodie, by the way?
I like to say that I am. I can eat. I feel like I can go to an expensive restaurant, but like I also love Flazzoli spaghetti. Okay, so like there's a range. All right.
It depends on the time of the day, right? Exactly. Now, but talk about going to college.
Okay.
Because you went to college not too far away from here in Nashville.
No, so I went to two different schools. I went to MTSU for broadcasting specifically. At Mount Juliet High School growing up, I was the anchor of the Bear News Network, and I just fell in love with broadcasting itself. I was telling you, I would come home every day from school, and my mom and I would watch Oprah, and then we would watch Talk of the Town on News Channel 5.
Oh, and speaking of that, what about a full circle? I didn't put that in the intro. I should have done that. And host of Talk of the Town.
Yes, just recently.
And that's amazing. By the time I already gave you an applause, so I'm going to just do that now. So that's amazing. And speaking of growing up, watching Oprah.
Yes.
And tell me how much that influenced you in growing up.
Well, you know, I would watch Oprah be so compassionate to her guests and always talk about really important topics. And that is, I think, what drove me to say, if I ever got into broadcasting, I would want to do it to help people. It would not be because I wanted to see my face on TV, which there are some people who get into this business and it's, you know, they just...
Immediately.
Right. They want to be on television. And I always said, if I do this, I want to do it in a way that impacts people and in a way that helps people. So for me, getting into meteorology, my love of weather on top of my love for broadcasting was just a no-brainer for me to help protect people when it comes to severe weather, to storms. That was always my passion. But I loved Channel 5. Even as a kid, I mean, Channel 5 was like our channel at home, right? So when I went to MTSU, the former anchor at News Channel 5, his name was Chris Clark. He was actually a professor at MTSU. And I was so nervous to be in his class because not only was I a big fan of him from watching him on TV, but he also hired Oprah Winfrey.
Yes. And speaking of which, we had Adriana on this show. And she did the exact same program as you.
Yeah.
And speaking on having that professor, and not only from a historical standpoint of running, you know, Talk of the Town.
Yes.
And it was just it's eye-opening. It's so cool how that college has, you know, you could almost touch it in a way, having that moment of saying, I do have an opportunity here. It's available here.
Yeah. And, you know, Yes, it is. And they did such a good job at prepping us to get into broadcasting and to do that, and to have someone like Chris Clark, who you idolize and who you think in your mind is just like the greatest human for finding and hiring Oprah Winfrey, to have someone like that be able to teach you and to mentor you and look at you and say, you could do this. I mean, it just gives you all the confidence, you know, to go out and eventually have a career and do it. So I was really, really blessed to be able to get that background from MTSU.
I hear that the program is very much like nowadays, in that program is just, it puts you, kind of goes you through the entire whole spectrum of things, from broadcasting to also creating. Now it's creating content.
Oh, for sure. You know, when I was there, this was 2007. Okay. So, you know, Instagram Reels, TikTok, all of that stuff.
Wasn't a thing yet.
Wasn't a thing yet. But yeah, I mean, they put you through the ringer of being able to gather news content and really made you understand exactly what you were getting yourself into when you got into news. And I remember putting together like my first story and it taking me like 3 days, and now I can do it in 3 hours.
Do they call it the Sizzle Reel? Is that still a term that they use on TV?
Well, yes. I used to have to, and I would put it on DVDs and send it out to news directors. My very first job I tried to get, I remember making like 50 DVDs and mailing them across the country.
It's like mixtapes. It's like CDs that you're having to sell. Well, it's basically, so for the people out there that are unaware, if you're trying to make it onto TV or have a job in broadcast journalism, I mean, what I mean by a sizzle reel is basically what they, I guess, reels are today, where it's just basically your best cuts of what you have done in at school. So, I mean, what were some of the things that were in your sizzle reel?
Wow. I remember doing a really hard-hitting story about how it was like an auto group there at MTSU. They made a car that ran on hydrogen and water, and the exhaust of the car, if you held a cup to it, would just fill with water. And so I was like, this is the best stand-up that I have done. And I shot myself holding this cup there and saying something like, and with the exhaust, it's so pure you can drink it.
God.
I know. And I drank it, and put that in my sizzle reel.
Oh my gosh.
I can't believe I did that. But yeah, I mean, we covered a lot of really interesting stories on campus. I remember a big story out of MTSU when I was there was the Islamic Center that was being built there. So a range from hydrogen run cars to really hard-hitting stuff. I mean, they really do prepare you to get
Well, that's what college is, right? Yeah. Because when we're growing up and we're going through college, we're looking for any kind of experience that's going to make a impact later and hopefully land us a job.
Yeah,
and when you were looking at, well, first of all, in that school, in that college, in that university, what was the most challenging course you ever had?
Oh, well, I would say the most challenging course I ever had was actually not at MTSU. It was when I went back to Mississippi State and got my meteorology degree, because MTSU was just broadcasting. So when I went back to Mississippi State, I had a class thermodynamics, and I was already in my first job reporting at this time. So I was working like 50, 60 hours a week and doing meteorology school on the side online. And this thermodynamics class, I was in the middle of a really hard week and I did not study for my very first test. I'm telling you. Out of 100, what do you think I made?
Well, me, I wasn't very good in college. So I will say the lowest score I ever got in college was a 54.
Oh, okay. Well, that's better than me. I made a 7 out of 100.
No way.
I'm telling you, I did not prepare for this test. I didn't study. I didn't do anything.
A 7?
Yes, a 7 out of 100. Okay.
What was the curve like on that?
I know, right? Exactly. So I took this test just basically blind, and I remember thinking, there's no way I can come back from this, right?
Oh, no.
There can't
I've never heard of anyone getting a 7 on an exam.
Exactly. And in college, I mean, you only have like 4 tests in a semester, right? And then like the midterm and the final. So I remember emailing my professor and saying, is there any way that I can come back and pass this class? You had to make a C or above in order to like move on, right?
Yeah.
And he said, you have to ace every single test from here at this point forward. I cried through every test, but I did it.
That is the hardest. That is so hard.
I know.
So, quick story about me when I was going to Texas A&M. There was a professor there. Shout out to Professor Swim. He did a Texas government class that you had to take in business. And long story short, bombed every test.
Yeah.
Bombed everything. Where it came down to my graduation date, and I don't know if I'm going to graduate, right? So I go there, talk to them. The guy before me was doing the exact same thing. He walked out bawling out because he had a internship and Mr. Swim wasn't going to pass him, right? Yeah. So I go in there, walk into Mr. Swim's classroom, and I say, I went to basically like that. I was like, look, dude, I went to everything you ever said. I've done everything you've asked. I've even been to some of your most annoying, like, foundational things that you do in college, right?
Right.
And he looks at me, he's like, Mendoza. He turns in his desk and looks at me because he was, like real mob boss, like not looking at me. Turns to me and said, Mendoza. I'm like, yeah, what's going on? And he says, I want you to do this. What I'm about to do for you, I want you to do for someone else later in life.
Aww.
I'm going to pass you. And I'm like, how far off was I? He's like, just listen. I'm going to pass you.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not going to tell you.
So shout out to Mr. Swim. You had that same kind of stuff, but acing every test though?
I had to ace every single one. But here's the catch with that. I now, as a meteorologist who goes out and talks to schools and often talks to STEM classes and kids who struggle with math and with science and everything, I always tell people it can be done. Because I mean, listen, if I can come back from making a 7 out of 100 on a test and then pull it together and pass the class, I promise you, you can do whatever you set your mind to.
So you said you were working when you were going to Mississippi State.
Yes.
What was that like, and how much of a realization did you have to grow up really quickly?
Yes, I did. I started in Jackson, Tennessee, which is a really small market. If you don't know how television markets work, the number one market in the country is New York City. There's 210 markets. The last one I think is like a small city in Montana. So when you come out of college, they want you to start in a really small city, a small market, and kind of work your way up. Nashville, I think at last check was 27.
Yeah, it's
25.
somewhere in the middle of everything.
Yeah, so top 20, which is great. This is kind of a market you aspire to go to in like a third job. So Jackson, Tennessee is where I went. It was market 179 at the time.
It's funny that they're ranked almost like a college basketball team.
Exactly. But it was WBBJ. It was the only TV station in the town. And yeah, I mean, I was a reporter covering hard news at the time, crime and everything else. And so, I mean, I was a 22-year-old who was deciding what people were seeing on the news every night.
How did you sleep at night?
Yeah, you know, it is hard when you cover some really hard topics in the news.
The things people do. Yeah,
the things people do, the things you see when you're out on stories. I mean, there was a time where after covering a car wreck, I had such bad PTSD after. It was like hard to drive after seeing what I saw covering this wreck. And, you know, you see things as a reporter. You're almost like and I say this in the weather department too, because we're almost like first responders. Oh, you guys are absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's anyone that's ever underestimating the work that a meteorologist really does. Because you are not only, when I think about going to sleep at night and I hear a siren. I didn't know anything about sirens until I moved to Nashville. But when you hear a siren of a tornado or you hear that there's something coming, what's the first thing everyone does? Yeah, they turn on the TV, they turn on Twitter, they turn on whatever they can, and they look up your face to see what's going on, or whoever's on TV to see what the weather's like. Right, and it's a huge responsibility. And it's not just a responsibility to tell you what that storm is doing. I find it's a big responsibility to keep you calm while I'm telling you what's going on with that storm, to not make you feel like you need to panic about what this storm is doing. Calmly walk you through where it's at, where you have to go, how quickly it's going to pass you, when you're in the clear, when you're safe. I think there is you have to be that reassuring voice to people. You can't make people panic in that moment, because we all know from March 3rd and what happened in 2020 here, we've seen the worst.
And that's so. What you're saying is there was a midnight storm, midnight tornado that hit Nashville, East Nashville, and surrounding areas. What was another city that was outside Nashville got destroyed?
It hit my hometown in Mount Juliet. It came a mile from my parents' house, actually. And Cookeville was another spot that it just, I mean, I think 20 people passed away in Cookeville from that tornado. And
it's something that is I remember seeing it. I remember hearing it. I was in this room, and it was I slept through it, but a lot of people didn't. And not only that, one thing that I learned about Nashville that day was how much Nashville, the community, came together. And talk to me about, going through some scary, before 2020, What were some experiences that you experienced out there reporting, or whether it's in weather, that just really kind of freaked you out a little bit?
Oh, freaked me out a little bit. That's interesting. I don't know if there's one specific story that freaked me out or scared me very much. I would say the scariest things are watching storms come in that you can't stop. Really, I think it was not a reporter story that made me feel that way. It is literally watching a hurricane that you cannot stop come straight for a city, is going to be devastated by it. It is watching a storm on radar. Like, there is nothing that prepares you for seeing a storm and a tornado that is on the ground that just wreaked havoc on Nashville, heading straight for your hometown and straight for possibly your parents' house. I was on vacation on March 3rd in 2020, so I had woken up to the tornado warning and flipped on. I turned my own station on and was watching. I saw where it was going on radar, and I could tell it was headed towards my parents' house. And I remember calling my mom and her saying, "Are we going to be okay?" And I just told her, just get in the bathroom.
You didn't know.
Yeah, and it was less than a mile from my parents' house, but it took me so long to kind of get over that storm. It really impacted me because you just saw how much devastation it caused, and to just drive through the streets of my hometown that I grew up in and see it devastated by this. It destroyed my childhood elementary school, Stoner Creek.
That's the saddest, because you can't drive by it anymore and just look at it.
They have rebuilt since, but yeah, I mean, in the time, and then West Wilson Middle School was my middle school that was destroyed in the tornado. It destroyed my nephew's school at DCA. So just like these really landmark places.
A moment like that in time, for anyone who's in meteorologists or you name it, right, on news, that is a defining moment in your career. And not only from a personal standpoint, also from a career standpoint. Because now you're able to use that. I mean, we talked about sizzle reel. That's not a sizzle reel people want, but is an important aspect in, let's say, your resume.
Sure.
Has it has it been able to really help your name as well, that, sad things like that happen, but you have to be professional and convey the right message?
It was probably the biggest storm of my career that I have covered. And what I really learned from that is how to talk to people like a human being. Right? Because if you're covering a storm, you can say, here's where it's at, here's where it's going. But the people of Cookeville, after that storm, I could never talk to them the same again. After they just lost so many of their neighbors' children who passed away from that tornado. Every single time there was a storm, even if it wasn't severe, I felt the urge to speak to them and say, this is okay. You're going to be fine. It's really loud. It's going to be really dark. You're going to hear the thunder, but everything's going to be fine. You learn a different way to speak to people after you go through something that is so traumatic, like the March 3rd tornado. So that's it's not about, to me, what it did to my career or the experience that I gathered covering a storm that large. To me, the impact I got from it was, this is how much closer we are as a community after something like that. This is how I learned to help you after something like that, because it's not just the one storm that comes in. It's every storm after that people are going to be scared of, Coming from that crazy storm, how have you impacted the community from this legislation that you were just talking about? Well, before I came to Nashville, I worked in Huntsville, Alabama. And what I learned from there, they have crazy severe weather, crazy storms. After the tornado outbreak of 2011, that happened in April 2011 there, they really worked as a state to get more community storm shelters in communities all across Alabama. And so it was like a no-brainer when I worked there that whenever we covered storms, we would say, our storm shelter list is online, and there would be designated places in every county that we covered where people could say, okay, here's the closest shelter to me. So when I came back to Nashville and was covering storms my first year here, I remember asking my assistant news director, do we have a storm shelter list that we can put online? And she said, we don't have that.
You just assume that people know.
Right. Or we just don't have any storm shelters. There's just not places for people to go other than your home. And it was just crazy to me that we didn't have that available to the public. So I started at News Channel 5 in 2017. So from 2017 till about 2021, I did stories about how we did not have storm shelters available to people and the reasons kind of behind that, and the fact that in the South, in this area, not only does Tennessee rank number 1 for nocturnal tornadoes that you can't see, where people are most vulnerable when they're asleep, but we also have a huge population that live in really vulnerable housing. So you're talking mobile homes that aren't anchored down, that are very susceptible to wind damage. So we have this vulnerable population. We have more trees around than typical tornado alley, which you would think of in Oklahoma, Kansas. Right. Yep. So all of these things add up to me and say, why do we not have places for people to go? And so I just started doing research about it. And I found out that a lot of churches and a lot of nonprofits don't open their doors because of insurance liability problems. So if they were to open and say, hey, come seek shelter,
they're liable.
They are liable if a tornado actually hit them and someone were to get hurt. So I worked with a few different legislators, Representative Jason Powell, shout out to him, because
absolutely,
he saw my stories, he heard what I was saying, and he was like, let's do something about it. So recently, I think it was back in April, it passed unanimously in the House and Senate, the Safer Places bill, and was signed into law. So
that's amazing. Now, one thing I got, because there's so much to unpack there, honestly, there's so much. But for the people that are watching this today, let's just talk about a home shelter. What can the people do today to, if there is a major, whether hurricane, storm of some kind, and they need a bunker down in place, what are the essential 5-10 things, let's say 5 things that you should have in that house, in that area, safe space?
Okay, so your safe place, you definitely want to make sure you have a way to get weather information. So whether it's a weather radio that is ran battery operated on top of, you can plug it into the wall, but just in case the power goes out, always have a secondary option. So we say your phone, make sure it's charged, and you have an app that you can use that will give you weather alerts as well. And then you want to have the basic necessities, right? You want to have water available. You want to have your personal information kind of close to hand because, I mean, heaven forbid,
my goodness,
something happens. I know it's just something you want to prepare for. You want to know what your insurance is. You want to have those important documents.
I wasn't expecting that answer.
Well, I mean, I know that's
true.
That's thinking the worst of the worst. I know, but when we're getting into severe weather season, it's oftentimes we have people get hit and then they say, I don't know where these documents are. But if you can keep that kind of in your safe place, so you just know it's there, it's good. Helmet.
I was just about to say that. It was a weird thing to learn that, but helmets. A lot of people never would think, if you were go into your safe space in the house, that a helmet would be there right next to the flashlight.
Exactly. Helmet and flashlight. So you want to protect your head. And the biggest things with tornadoes is the debris that they pick up and that they carry. And they've just become, unfortunately, with these really strong tornadoes, they can be
missiles.
Projectiles. Yeah. And you just want to be able to protect, especially, the head from that. So with kids, also, if you have really young children, a car seat, you can put them in that and it keeps them safe as well. I mean, I could go on and on about the things you need, but
now most people would assume that to be the safest place in the home is going to be the first floor inside in the bathroom,
right?
And preferably a tub.
Sure.
Now, and that's what I'm thinking. But if you have a large family and you have, let's say, there's families out there with 6 people, right? Not everyone can fit in the tub.
Just be in the bathroom. I would say you always want to be the lowest floor, most interior room. 4 people, most of the time it's a bathroom or a closet. So you can all pack into the closet, all get into the bathroom, whether or not you're all in the tub. I like bathrooms for people because the piping inside of the walls
makes it stronger.
It helps to reinforce those walls. So if you do get really strong winds, I think a bathroom is preferred, but the key is just to be away from outside walls. They're the most susceptible. Be away from windows because, of course, that's where you're most vulnerable.
How challenging was it to get that initiative passed? I mean, because there's so many people that, you know, there's in any concept, right? Just to even have a show here, you know, there was a list of things that you have to do. How challenging was it to get that bill passed?
Well, the biggest thing is to get people to listen. It took years to get people to hear me out. I would go to events and I would network and try to talk to as many people as I could. I would cold call lawmakers and say, listen, I'm a meteorologist. I know, you know, what goes on with storms. And most importantly, I know what people tell me when they're in the middle of a storm, just from a on-air personality, people messaging me saying, we're scared. We don't know where to go. Well, should I take my kid to Walmart? Those kind of things. And I'm just like, I'm trying to help. And it took Representative Jason Powell hearing me out and the one person saying, okay, this is something that I think we should do something about. And then him taking that step forward and bringing it in front of the House, that really got it going. But it took years of me just feeling like I was screaming into a void to get people to listen.
Which is kind of surprising to me, because the reason why I say that is, I think to the public, right, if you're on TV, especially if you're on a very well-respected thing as Channel 5, I'm going to give you some love for that. You would think that you have so much more credibility and people would listen to the voices of everyone that works from there, that, you know, necessarily you wouldn't need a, you know, someone with some, you know, in government to really push. You know, I'm surprised that it took a little bit more. It took so much help to get it done.
Well, you know, imagine all the things, you know, that lawmakers look at and the legislation that they go through every year, the things that are most important to them. You know, at some point, it just is up to them whether it's, you know, big enough for them to deal with that legislative session. And I didn't know, I mean, I'm not a legislator. I didn't know a whole lot about how this process works. So I would call people outside of the legislative session and they're like, Heather, we don't even like start talking about bills until like this day, call back, you know. So it took a lot of learning.
A lot of lists, like I said.
Yeah, a lot of learning for me to kind of learn, you know, who I need to speak with. And truly it was just me talking to one person and that person saying, hey, talk to this person. And this person saying, talk to this person. And eventually I found someone that said, Representative Powell would really be interested in this. He you know, does a lot with weather and, you know, community stories like that. He dealt a lot with the flooding that happened in Nashville. So they said, I think he might be really interested in this. And it was the right
meant
call.
To be.
Yeah.
What about mentors? So one thing I love talking about on this show.
Yeah.
No matter how successful you are, whether you're a businesswoman, businessman, musician, you name it, everyone has someone that they looked up to and someone that helped a helping hand. Yeah. So who was your mentor when you're going in through this amazing career journey? Well,
I would say I always looked up to Lelan Statom, who is my colleague now at News Channel 5. He and Ron Howes, who is our old chief meteorologist. They both were just like two people I absolutely idolized. I met Charlie Neese, who used to be a meteorologist at Channel 5. Before my time, he had left a few years before I got there, but he actually invited me to the station one time when I was still in college, showed me around the station and talked to me about how to like get into meteorology. So there were several people in the business that I went to. I would say right now, my best mentor is Bree Smith, who
That's
is
awesome.
Yeah, my coworker, but she is just the best person to rely on when it comes to, when I say I know how to speak to people like a human now, it is because of Bree's guidance, because she knows really well how to connect with people and not just tell them what the high is for the day, but how to really make people feel important when she's talking to them and really explain things in a way that people know. So Bree, I have to shout her out.
Absolutely.
She is the girl I go to when I need something.
Now, for the people that are watching this today, that a lot of our demographic is between the ages of 20 to 28.
Okay.
So that means that they're somewhere in college somewhere, or just leaving their first position out of college to getting their first role.
Yeah.
Now, what could they do today to help them to have a person maybe have a job in broadcasting? What could they do to prepare themselves?
Well, I would say number one, don't be afraid to fail and do as many things as you can within the industry, whether it is working as a production assistant or, you know, trying your hand behind the camera as well as in front of the camera. Do as many things as you can so that you understand all the jobs. From my point of view, I made sure I knew exactly what it was like to work in production and be behind the scenes so that when I was the person in front of the camera, I respected the other people in the building and knew exactly what their job was. And
you had to do it all, though, because for your first role, I know for a fact that journalists have to be the person to put on the camera sometimes.
Yeah,
they have to set up the picture this, y'all. There could be, let's just use an example of a fire, right? And you're the first person there you have to set up the camera, you have to get the mic, you have to sometimes even do it live.
Yes.
You have to prepare yourself to not only speak and clear out something that may happen in your head or someone passing by.
Right.
I mean, the amount of work that you guys do all of y'all that do that stuff is it's so challenging that people don't even realize what goes behind it. They just see it on the screen.
Exactly. So it's called an MMJ, a multimedia journalist, but that basically means we shoot, write, we edit all of our stories. And that is what I did in my first job. And it's a grind, I'll tell you that. If you're in college and you wanted to get into broadcasting, be prepared to do that, to know how to edit, how to write, how to shoot, how to be in front of the camera. You literally have to do everything.
They got ahead of the curve, though.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone who is growing up today with the camera in their hand.
Yes.
It's so accessible now.
It is. And people are editing their videos on TikTok.
You remember when that was hard? So when we were growing up, we didn't have so there was YouTube, but YouTube, no one shared the secrets. Like they do today.
Exactly.
They share secrets now so openly, how to make things sound better when you had to figure it out yourself.
Exactly.
And today, when you're thinking about just growing up, and when you think about where you are today, would young Heather be super astonished and just be like, whoa, like, how did that happen?
My gosh. Yeah. Young Heather once wrote in her notebook, in her 10-year plan, work at News Channel 5, possibly work on Talk of the Town. So it well, young Heather would be really proud.
I'm gonna ask about it because we got to talk about it. One of the most important shows in Nashville, Talk of the Town. Talk to me about the history of that show.
Yeah.
And the significance it has here in Nashville.
Talk of the Town is an institution in this town. Everybody knows about that show. And it is still to this day the longest running, highest rated, locally produced talk show in the entire country. So it was, when I say I wanted to work on Talk of the Town one day, I mean, it was like a huge,
it was a reach,
a huge dream of mine. Because I got into doing the weather, and I thought maybe when I came to Channel 5 one day, like I could possibly do something with the show. So when Meryl, who was the host and worked at Channel 5 for 35 years,
it was just last year or this year.
It was in January.
It was in January of this year. She retired.
She did. She decided she'd retire.
That's amazing by itself because that was a long,
wonderful long career that she had there. I mean, she did so much great things for the city, for businesses, to highlight them around Nashville. I mean,
personalities.
Yeah, it grew with the city itself. So it was just an honor when I went to Meryl and said, do you think that maybe
what was that blessing like? So how do you approach, so that's a great question. So how do you approach a situation like that from your story? Obviously, it's a great story because you have so significance to the show and to the city, right? But talk to me about how intimidating that must be to have that conversation.
Oh, very. Because, I mean, listen, I grew up watching people like Meryl and Lelan on Talk of the Town. And so, I had worked with her now for 5 years. And I'll tell you, it is the best thing in the world when the people you idolize just turn out to be really genuinely great people. So Meryl and I had a really great relationship, and I had been on the show doing like little crafting segments before. So I had wished her the best in her retirement and told her congratulations and just how much I loved and respected her. And she asked me to lunch, and we just got to talking, and she said, do you think that maybe you might be interested in taking over my role? And Meryl, because she was such a huge part of Talk of the Town for decades, I think she really wanted to protect the show going forward and wanted to see someone who could really carry it into its next chapter. And I was just deeply, deeply honored that she saw that in me and thought that I could be a good person for it. So her blessing, my goodness, it meant everything.
Well, talk about having a reference.
Yeah.
I mean, now one thing that I want to point out here is how important it is for not people to just have goals. I think that's an interesting thing I've learned in my entire time doing the show here is that there are people out there that have struggle with creating goals.
Yeah.
Now, there are reach goals, right? Obviously, Talk of the Town for you was a reach goal, but the immediate goal was being, you know, first getting your degree and then beyond, right?
Right.
Talk to people about who struggle with developing goals and how they can overcome even the farthest idea
Right.
and make it happen somehow.
I think for me personally, I have to take it one step at a time, right? When even talking about the storm shelter bill, I remember going to my bosses and saying, I have a grand plan. I am going to do these stories, and then one day I'm going to get a law changed. I mean, that was years ago. And as I was doing it, I remember thinking, is this really helping? Am I really doing anything? Are people even listening? But I knew I had to take it one step at a time. I had to do one story, then another story, learn a little bit more, talk to a few more people, and then eventually you're going to reach that goal. I mean, even in my first job, I remember thinking, can I do this? Can I make it to News Channel 5? Is that a goal that is obtainable to me? But the more you keep pushing forward and the more you don't tell yourself no, don't let the bad days control you, don't let the times you fail control you.
And they happen.
Yeah,
it's crazy to think that, like, as humans, right, we have these days that we may be doing so well in your career. You don't see it.
Yeah.
You literally think of what missed opportunities or situations that you can excel better. And, you know, those moments of, I think they call it
imposter syndrome.
Imposter
my
syndrome.
gosh.
Talk about it.
Oh, my
Talk about it, please.
Listen, when I started at Channel 5, I had the biggest imposter syndrome. I mean, imagine someone who like wanted to work there so much from as a young child, finally getting their like dream job and working with people that you watched on TV your whole life. I was like, I am not good enough for this. When I'd have to fill in at night and do the weather on an evening show and stand in the place that Ron House stood. Oh my gosh, like it was the most nerve-wracking thing that I had ever done. And I remember straight up thinking one day driving to work, they're gonna fire me because they were gonna realize I'm not good enough to do this job. But it's just the imposter syndrome that you have. And I definitely had it for, you know, a good few months when I started there.
Would you say that's a very important feeling? So, for example, whenever I had a moment where I said, okay, they're gonna call me today, and the old company that I used to work for, I would say I'm gonna have a hard conversation. And every time I would have one-on-ones with my boss, that person would say, man, you're way too hard on yourself. Like, no, we're not gonna let you go. Is it good to have those feelings for the people that have that feeling of like, oh snap, I'm gonna get fired today? But does that just mean that you really care?
I think it does. It does mean you really care. You just can't let it control you. That's the thing. You can't let that imposter syndrome and the anxiety keep you back from going forward and trying harder. Let it fuel you into going after what you really want. Don't let it stop you from going after that. So it's easier said than done.
Well, speaking of easier said than done, we have a section on our show called crowd noise. And crowd noise is where people, it was, like I said, easier said than done because I had to find these people to get these questions for you.
Okay.
And are you excited to try crowd noise?
I am, but I'm also nervous. I want to know who you talked to.
Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
You have to hear it from the voice. So we'll be right back with Heather in 1 sec.
Hey Heather, what is the process like for someone to win an Emmy?
Oh, well, they open up Emmy submissions for, you know, the entire year that, you know, we're looking at. And there are many different categories that you can submit to, from news, from weather, from sports. So we would say, from a weather perspective, we would say, what are our big weather events that we had, or was there some kind of coverage that we think was, you know, really great team coverage or whatever. So my two Emmys that I have won were both from the March 3rd tornado and the team coverage that we did for that. The station would say, this is, you know, what we're going to pick, and they'll submit it, and then you get nominated for the award. And I think I've been nominated every year since I've been at Channel 5 for something to do with the weather, but only one the year that we had the March 3rd tornado.
What is amazing to me is for let people understand how challenging that is, because, you know, to win an Emmy, you're going up against how many people?
So the Mid-South Emmys, which is our region, I mean, there are dozens. I mean, you're talking a few different states that are involved in that process. So you would have TV stations from all of these 4 or 5 different states all submitting.
With all great content to submit with.
Exactly. And so then it gets judged by a different region across the country. So a different Emmy region, say California or like a West Coast region, would look at all the Emmy submissions. They would judge it, and then they determine based on a percentage who gets nominated, and whoever has the highest would be, I guess, the winner for that Emmy. So, I mean, it's a pretty tough process. It's not easy to kind of go through.
Wouldn't you also say that that is near the pinnacle of what you can actually get from being in front of a camera? Is that Emmy?
It is. I mean, it is something that people would say is prestigious or that they would strive to get. For me, it's difficult, right? Because, you know, to say we did such great coverage, we won an Emmy, that's always wonderful. It's nice. But again, both of those Emmys that I won were from March 3rd. So really, it's a really sad thing that had to happen, you know, for us to do that. But it just proves that, you know, when times are really hard and when you have something so terrible, we as a team work so hard to make sure that everyone at home is safe, is informed, feels like they have all the right information that they need. And so that is what you end up being, you know, getting the Emmy for. But it is also like a catch-22, right? Because it's hard to say, you know, oh, I won this Emmy, but this terrible thing had to happen, you know, for us to have an event that would be submitted and get nominated.
When you go out in, let's just say, the Publix, and you just need to go grab some groceries, what's it like when people come and they recognize you? And what is the typical, like, is it always that I wish I could be wrong with my job? What's it like?
No, typically the first thing someone says to me is, you're really short in person. Like, you look a lot taller when you're on TV. But everybody's usually always very, very kind and just wants to tell you about how they watch Channel 5 all of the time. And, you know, you feel, it's funny because I just look at a camera every single day and they look at me, you know, when I'm on their television. So people really feel like you are a part of their everyday lives and their family. And it is the best part of the job, not being actually on camera, but being able to go out in the public and meet all the people that I talk to every single day and to really feel like you're in the community. I'll tell you, other than asking if I'm really this short in person, the other question they always ask is Lelan really that nice? And the answer is always, he's nicer than you think.
I love it. Okay, so speaking of people and pinch me moments, I think I got a question right here.
Okay.
What is a moment or an interview that you had that was really just like a pinch me, I'm dreaming moment?
Pinch me, I'm dreaming moment. Well, I'll tell you, the very first day that I took over Talk of the Town, I interviewed Rob Lowe.
Really?
Yes. And I was like, what is my life? What am I doing? And I was like, I just started, you know, on Talk of the Town. I was very new to doing lifestyle interviews, you know. It wasn't really my forte. And I was like, the first day you're going to give me Rob Lowe of all people. I'm a huge Parks and Rec fan, you know, but he was really cool. So that was really fun.
Is it, so talked about the differences there.
Yeah.
So talk about differences from a multimedia journalist, you know, speaking to folks and interviewing folks versus a lifestyle interviewer that speaks to from celebrities to daddy's dogs to folks like me.
Well, you know, I've learned since I have interviewed people like Rob Lowe and Mandy Moore. I interviewed her a couple weeks ago.
Saw that one, actually. I was getting my
fun.
haircut. That was cool.
Yeah. I mean, what I have learned is that celebrities are really just normal people. You know, you get really nervous to talk to them, but
they're trained.
Yeah, well, they are very trained, and they're just usually very down to earth, you know, but it's a little bit more fun, obviously, to do this side of things, because when you're MMJing and you're doing news reporting, a lot of times you're covering really serious topics or controversial topics, and it's not as fun, you know, when you're out doing that. So lifestyle shows, so much more fun because we get to highlight the good things and the fun things happening around town and talk to just some really fun people.
Would you say that's your favorite moment so far?
From Talk of the Town? I have to think on that, what my favorite moment would be so far. I mean, yes, Rob Lowe, Mandy Moore, I don't know, that was a really big one.
I was so that's actually funny. The day that you interviewed Mandy Moore, I was wondering if you filmed that, was that still live?
We shot it before the show, so it was like maybe an hour beforehand.
Because you were looking at the screen, and she was obviously she wasn't there in person.
Yeah,
she was promoting. It was cats?
Listen, yes.
What was she? Yeah, she was promoting cats, right?
She was partnering with Purina Cat Chow of all things to do stories. They were trying to get people to give them their cat stories, and something we haven't talked about is that I'm a big cat lady. Love cats. I have my own cat, and so I was just like, Mandy Moore, who was like my idol as a kid who loved A Walk to Remember. I get to talk to her and talk to her about cats. Like, perfect.
It was the funniest thing, because as I'm there talking to my barber about who's coming on because he hears all the stories about who's coming when and everything like that. I'm like, oh, I'm talking to her on TV right now, and she's like, Mandy Moore? And I'm like, no, I'm talking to Heather.
Man.
But no. The reason why I say that, he was more impressed when I said I'm talking to you, because they keep it on Channel 5 every day.
Oh, that is so sweet.
Yes, it was kind of like he was surprised I was going to talk to Mandy Moore, but I was like, no, I'm talking to the host. Oh, and I'm talking to Heather, Channel 5. And she's like, really?
Oh.
and it made me wonder, because I'm just like, man, is everyone, when they first meet you, they're like, whoa, like it's like seeing a teacher leaving outside of school. You never see them, but when you do, it's kind of like, whoa, you eat.
Well, I think it's good to have that personal connection with people, right? Because I mean, they do just see you on TV, and oftentimes, and everyone that I meet genuinely is usually very nice. But I mean, you think about how you.
I hope
no. Everyone is. But I'm just saying, when you see people on TV or see celebrities, sometimes you feel like you can say anything to them, right? Or you can be a keyboard.
Because you know them so well.
Right, exactly. It can be like a keyboard warrior and stuff. So it's nice when people can actually see that I'm a real human being, or that the people that they watch every day on TV, we're just normal human beings. Can I tell you the craziest story that
Please. What do you mean? This is YouTube. The crazier the better, except I like giving people content they can digest. So I'm excited. I'm excited to hear the crazy moment.
So when I was reporting out of Jackson, Tennessee, we had like counties that we had to cover. So mine were Henry, Obion, and Weakley County here in Tennessee. I mean, you're talking 2 hours away from my station. I would have to drive to go. But in this small little town, my favorite story was this guy hogtied a guy who was trying to break into his house and held him in the trunk of his car until the police got there. And so just like
talk about small town.
I know, really. I mean, they were just like funny, like little stories like that when you're in a really, really small market and small town, like the kind of news stories that you cover. It's just different.
How many of your friends call you whenever there's some type of serious weather approaching? Friends in your phone?
Of them.
All of them? Every time?
Yes.
What's the typical text message that they'll send you?
They'll say, is a storm coming my way? What time is the storm going to be here? Is the storm really going to be? That's my favorite question, is when I'm forecasting snow of all things, and they'll say, is it really going to snow 2 inches? It's like I'm giving some kind of secret forecast, like I'm saying one thing on TV, but it's like, no, I'm going to tell you it's really only going to snow 1/2 of an inch. I'm just telling people it'll snow 2 inches.
And it must be kind of annoying that there are folks out there that are just so, weather changes. No offense to anyone, any meteorologist. It's not that I do not listen at all because I call you guys when I'm scared.
Yeah.
But whenever it's going to rain 30%, I always say it's not. Yeah. Personally, is that a best rule of thumb? If it's under 50, it's not going to rain?
I think that people seriously misunderstand the percentages that go with our forecasting. They'll say 30% means, I've had people say, does that mean 30% of my day is going to be ruined? Does that mean 30%, like a 30% out of 100%? Does it mean 30% of the area you cover is going to get rain? It can be very confusing.
I'm thinking it's 30% of 100. Is that correct?
Well, you have to take your confidence over how likely you think it's going to rain in the area that you are forecasting for, and you use that to determine the percentage. So what is the percentage? If I'm 100% certain that 20% of the area is going to get rain, we'll give it a 20%.
I always end my show with 2 questions, and these 2 questions I've never changed with anyone.
Okay.
But the first question always has to do with hate. being in the public eye, and not only being in the public eye, having to go through so much in your career. You've had haters, and absolutely. But how does it not get to you? How do those moments not affect you every day?
Well, I would say it used to get to me a lot more when I was younger. You know, when I was new in the career, as a 22, 23-year-old who wasn't used to getting those kind of comments, I would have one person who sent me a message every day and said, I hate your outfit, or I hate the lipstick that you have on that day. I know, and it's not easy to get messages like that. But I'll say over time, you just learn that you got to let it roll off. You know, you can't really take those comments to heart. And the more you become confident in your job, especially as an on-air personality, the more confident you are on camera and doing your job, the easier it is to say, I know that I did a good job, and I don't care if you like my lipstick. You know what I mean? And you just kind of let it roll off your back. So.
What's been one of the funniest places someone's ever asked you to take a picture with them?
The liquor store.
Which one? I'm a fan of all liquor stores here in the city.
Okay, so I was on my way to a baby shower, and I was coming off of a morning show. So not only was this a liquor store, it was at 8:00 in the morning. So I was leaving the station. I had to go get some champagne for this baby shower, and I was full. I call it my Heather.
Sure, Heather. Sure.
Right. Yeah. I was in my full Heather Mathis outfit. That's what I call myself when I'm like in my dress and have like my makeup and eyelashes. I get recognized more when I've got like my work clothes on.
Totally makes
right?
sense. Yeah.
So I'm in my work clothes in the liquor store at 8:00 in the morning buying champagne, and this person comes up and says, are you the girl from the news? Did I just see you give the weather? And I'm like holding 2 bottles of champagne, like, yes, that's me. And so we had to take a photo together, and I was like, oh dear.
And then also, I mean, that is hilarious. I love that story. It's just, you never realize how many people really do look up to you until moments like that.
Yeah.
And is it something that you thought about later? And I'll ask my last question in a second, but you know, getting to the stage now where you're recognized, people are so happy to see you and take pictures with you and get to meet you and hopefully say, have you had people say, do you remember me?
Well, funny enough, I met that same person that I took a picture with at the liquor store like a few months later at a gas station. He was like, oh, I've actually met you before. I'm the person who took a picture with you at the liquor store. So
how does it feel to get all this, you know, just to have that love of the city of Nashville always behind your back?
I mean, it always feels amazing. I try to keep it in perspective, right? And I never want... Again, going back to the reason I got into this job, I never wanted it to be about being recognized. I never wanted it to be about me being on TV or the kind of ego that you can feel saying, oh, people want to meet me or take my photo. It's never, ever been about that for me. I always want to keep it in perspective that I do this job for a reason, and it is to help people, whether it's with storms or now Talk of the Town highlighting, you know, some of the best places in our city. So to have people recognize that and enjoy watching me, and kind of, I feel like it's almost them saying, I see what you're doing and I appreciate, you know, the heart that you give this job, and it's so appreciated.
So the way that we tee off the last part of our show is you look straight in that camera right there. You say your name. And then you say, this is how I walk the line. Okay. And we'll see your day in the life. And I'm excited to see what it's going to be.
Okay. Ready?
Right, you ready to go?
Okay.
All right. And right after the applause. And 3.
I'm Heather Mathis, and this is how I walk the line.
Hey, Heather.
Here with a recipe that is perfect for vegans who want a good burger, maybe even non-vegans as well, because it smells so good. Thanks for making our kitchen smell good this morning.
You're very welcome. This is one of my favorites.
And we already have some onions and some garlic on the cooktop. Tell us what we have prepared already. A recipe segment for black bean quinoa burgers. They smell so good. So right now, the reason we're going to take this ahead of the show, we have some weather moving in. We're under a tornado watch, and so if we are able to go ahead and get this on tape, we can save it if weather takes over the show, and also we know it's already there just to be on the safe side.
two counts. That blue box right there has just over 250 lightning strikes. In southern Middle Tennessee, from Franklin to the state line, look at that, over 500 lightning strikes. So again, no storm warnings at the moment. All right, I'm Lelan Statom.
And I'm Heather Mathis.
Quinoa burger is on the menu today.
Good job. You redeemed yourself. So after we do our teases, sometimes we will have some pre-tapes. I always go around and talk to our other guests that we have on the show today. We do a lot of prep work before the show for writing the questions and getting the segment ready, but it's always good once they're in the studio to really go over the segment, talk about what they want to hit on. Today we have former Voice contestant Emily Ann Roberts is now releasing her debut EP. She joins us now to tell us more about her incredible journey. Welcome back to Talk of the Town.
Oh, thank you for having me. We're playing all over, so people should definitely check out my schedule to see where I'm going to be.
Well, you heard it here first. We got the exclusive from you. Big announcement coming your way. Congratulations on everything and the album coming out.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You can get the album Can't Hide. So this is our main studio where pretty much everything on News Channel 5 is shot. Talk of the Town has its main space right here, but we actually have a separate studio, so I'm going to show you what it looks like. Back in the day, I know we discussed how Oprah Winfrey started here. She was actually in this studio. We have a separate Studio B that everything on the Plus channel, we call this the land between the studios because you got one and then you've got the other. You're actually so this is our second set. So this is like the old school set when I used to turn News Channel 5 on. This is what I would see. And Talk of the Town, back in the day, was shot on these red couches. So I would watch Lelan and Meryl on these red couches and want to be a part of the show. So everything that's on News Channel 5 Plus, like Sportsline, Open Line, Retirement Report, just in-depth, like longer hour shows, they get shot in here. We also have Southern Woods and Waters, which is a show that gets paid, and you can clearly tell where their set is. Has the deer hanging up. So when I'm not in the studio, I go on location and do shoots like this. This is a fashion segment where we're talking to Jenna, Huntley, and Amy. They are three Nashville women who started their very own women's golf fashion line. It's called Honors, all the pieces. Let me tell you, they are so cute. I want everything that's in there, but what we're doing right now, my photographer is getting video of the model who is showing us some of the pieces. All of the girls themselves are wearing the clothes. This is honestly one of my favorite parts of the job because not only do we get to really highlight businesses, but you get to come enjoy the sunshine and be out and really get that face-to-face with people. I'm Heather Mathis, the host of Talk of the Town, and this is how I walk the line.